I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this country, because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion, and yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And, hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not, but I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, you know, I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out.
When it comes to the international system of commerce and trade, it's legitimate for poorer countries to continue to seek access to wealthier markets. And by the way, wealthier markets, that's not the big problem that you're having. A small African country is sending you tea and flowers. That's not your biggest economic challenge. It's also proper for advanced economies like the United States to insist on reciprocity from nations like China that are no longer solely poor countries, to make sure that they're providing access to their markets and that they stop taking intellectual property and hacking our servers.
Further, what they have said is that we need to not worry about manufacturing in America, because what we should establish is a policy of unfettered free trade. We don't need tariffs. What we need is to allow corporate America the freedom to throw American workers out on the street, people who are making 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour, health care, pensions, throw them out on the street, because somehow, Madam President, we are going to create wealth in America and good paying jobs in America as we shut down plants, we move to China, corporations there pay workers 20, 30 cents an hour, and we bring the product back into this country. And anyone who goes shopping in a mall knows how difficult it is today to find the product made in America. But that is the philosophy. And I have to say, in that regard, the champion, and he is honest on this one, Senator McCain has been criticized recently for not being the most honest candidate we have seen in terms of his ads and so forth. He has been honest on this one. He is the lead advocate of unfettered free trade. And that's an also important part of this right-wing ideology, that it is good for America that corporations can go to China and bring products back into this country.
How far does China have to go? How much more repression? How big a trade deficit and loss of jobs for the American worker? And how much more dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo? As I mentioned, it's about jobs, proliferation, and human rights. And there are those who say we shouldn't link human rights and trade and proliferation and trade. I disagree. But if we just want to take up this issue on the basis of economics alone, indeed, China should not receive most favored nation status for several reasons that I'd like to go into now. I'd like to call the attention of our colleagues to this chart on the status quo that the business community is asking each and every one of us to endorse today. Right now, we have a $34 billion trade deficit with China, the 1995 figure. It will be over $40 billion for 1996. Since the Tiananmen Square massacre, this figure has increased 1,000%, from $3.5 billion then to about $34 billion now. In terms of tariffs, I think it's interesting to note that the average U.S. MFN tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States is 2%. Whereas the average Chinese MFN tariff on U.S. goods going into China is 35%. Is that reciprocal? On exports, China only allows certain industries into China, of U.S. Industries into China, and therefore only 2% of U.S. exports are allowed into China. On the other hand, the U.S. allows China to flood our markets with a third of their exports, and that'll probably go over 40%. And it's limitless because we have not placed any restriction. In terms of jobs, this is the biggest and cruelest hoax of all. Not only do we not have market access, not only do they have prohibitive tariffs, not only are our exports not let in very specifically, but China benefits with at least 10 million jobs from U.S. China trade. The president in his statement requesting this special waiver said that China trade supports 170,000 jobs in the United States, 170,000 jobs, whereas our imports from China support 10 million jobs at least. Fact is that U.S. China trade is a job loser. And one of the reasons that it is because well, first let me just make another point, and that is that our colleagues on the other side of this issue will say that trade with China, exports to China have increased 3 times in the last 10 years. They have. But they fail to mention that imports from China have increased 11 times, thereby leading to this huge trade deficit. The other issue, in addition, if intellectual property is a $2 billion, $3 billion loss, technology transfer is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. If you want to sell to China, your products into China, the Chinese insist that you open a factory there. They misappropriate your technology, open factories of their own, and then say to you, now we want to see your plan for export. That's as simply as I can say it briefly. But the fact is, this isn't about products made in America. The Chinese want American products that are made in China. And the most serious of these transfers of technology are in the airline industry, where Boeing tail sections of the Boeing 737s were mostly made in Wichita, Kansas. Now they are made in Shen province, where workers make $50 a month. And the transfer of the technology and the transfer of the jobs has taken place. General Motors, Ford, they're all fighting to get into build.
China just canceled Boeing's contract too. So as we speak, Boeing is coming back to the United States. Isn't that
Get in to build
crazy?
factories there so they can make parts there. They want MFN so they can get those parts back into the United States. So we are exporting not low-tech jobs and textile jobs. We're exporting our technology. Now, if you take a country the size of China with the very cheap, and in some instances, slave labor, the lack of market access, the rip-off of our intellectual property, the transfer of technology, a country that is not willing to play by the rules in any respect in this trade relationship, you have a serious threat not only to our relationship, but to the industrialized world. And if there's one message that I want our colleagues to understand today and our constituents is that on this day, your member of Congress could have drawn the line to say to the President of the United States, do something about this U.S. China trade relationship that is a job loser for the United States. And this brings us to the point that others have said, well, we can't isolate China. Do you think for 1 minute that with 10 million jobs at least, and 35 billion and be over $40 billion this year in a trade surplus, all those billions of dollars in surplus, that the Chinese are going to walk away? Where are they going to take 35 to 40% of their exports? Who's going to buy them? This is what sustains the regime. The funding and the jobs. They can't have those people out of work. They have to be at work exporting to the United States.
104% tariffs on China are not enough. I'm advocating 400%. I do business in China. They don't play by the rules. They've been in the WTO for decades. They have never abided by any of the rules they agreed to when they came in for decades. They cheat, they steal IP. I can't litigate in their courts. They take product, technology, they steal it, they manufacture it, and sell it back here. Never has an administration.
400% tariffs? What would that look like?
I want Xi on an airplane to Washington to level the playing field. This is not about tariffs anymore. Nobody has taken on China yet, not the Europeans, no administration for decades. As someone who actually does business there, I've had enough. I speak for millions of Americans who have IP that have been stolen by the Chinese. I have nothing against the Chinese people. They brought great literacy, art, and tech to the world. The government cheats and steals, and finally, an administration, you may not like Trump, you may not like his style or his rhetoric, finally, an administration that puts up and says enough. 400% tariffs tomorrow morning. He'll tell you why. Xi can only stay the supreme leader if people are employed. If we wipe out any business there, because we are still 39% of all consumables on Earth and 25% of the world's GDP, America is the #1 economy on Earth with all the cards. We will not have that forever. It's time to squeeze Chinese heads into the wall now.
Well, hold on a second,
tariffs.
Kevin. Well, I hear you, but hold on. If we're talking about people, the average consumer, not necessarily the head honchos of businesses all across the globe, can they withstand the pressure of that sort of tax on the goods?
It's short-lived. There will be
but what's your timeline compared to, you don't know the average American's timeline.
Were you surprised that Donald Trump won the election?
No.
Why do you think he won?
People were angry at the what do they call it, the state, the swamp, ineffective government, that people wanted kind of more pro-growth and pro-business policies, that they didn't want to be lectured to on social policies continuously. I think it's the lecturing part of it. It's the social superiority. It's the my way or the highway. I traveled around this country. I felt it wherever I went.
You had Fukuyama write The End of History, which basically said that democratic capitalism is the end-all be-all, and we're down to one system, and the whole world's going to run on that system. That philosophy then animated a neoliberal and neoconservative consensus in Washington for 25 years. And there were three key pillars of that, let's call it globalist consensus. Number one, we'd have open borders, free flow of labor. In fact, the Wall Street Journal editorial, which, is considered to be conservative, actually supported a constitutional amendment saying that we'd have open borders. Number two, we'd have open flows of trade and capital. So basically the unfettered free trade agenda. And then number three, the third leg of it was Pax Americana. We'd deploy American troops all over the world to defend this consensus because they'd be greeted as liberators, not occupiers. I think all three pillars have been refuted. And the person who has represented the shift in this consensus is Donald Trump. When you have a bipartisan consensus that I'd say included both Bush Republicans and Clinton Democrats around these three pillars of globalism, and then the country turns against that, that's not going to be a smooth process. It's going to be a disruptive process.
The Chinese have hit back at Trump. The US tariffs on Chinese goods went into effect a few minutes ago, 5 GMT. But the Chinese now have put a 15% tariff on US coal and US LNG, plus an additional 10% tariff on crude oil, farm equipment, and some autos. But wait for it, Google has been dragged into this. Google is now the subject of the anti-monopoly regulator in China launching an investigation. This just expanded.
And when we dismantle the government, we're going to miss it. but we're going to miss it only after disasters. And that's not a price that we should be paying. And it is not a price we should be paying, especially because the reorganization of the government, rethinking about the government are not based on an empirical approach, a careful approach. It is based on this kind of a ideological approach. So that's my worst case scenario, right? So something really bad happens and that has global implications. Look at 9/11. 9/11 changed the world history. Invasion of the Iraq, which was totally a war of choice rather than a war of necessity, was due to 9/11, right? So we cannot underestimate sometimes these shocks that are happening can change the world history. And I'm afraid that the next one may happen.
And yet today we are here before the Senate because one person in our country wishes to raise taxes. Well, this is contrary to everything our country was founded upon. One person is not allowed to raise taxes. The Constitution forbids it. The Constitution was so concerned with the power of taxes, which some have said the power of taxes is the power to destroy. But our founding fathers were so concerned with this that they said, no, the president will not have the power to legislate. The president will not have the power to tax. Only Congress will be able to tax the people, and only by originating tax bills in the House. It was that specific. They were so mortified. They were so worried by having a monarchy. They were so worried about having all the power gravitate to the executive that they said we must split the powers.
Indonesia trade surpluses are with India, with U.S., with Philippines, and with EU. On India, it is a lot of coal and a bit of palm oil. On the US, it's a lot of textile. With EU, it's quite diversified. Last year, 8 billion trade surplus for Indonesia. The year before, 11 billion trade surplus. We are not imposing any tariffs or tax or any arbitrary measure. We are a reliable and predictable partner. Indonesia is a champion of palm oil. Fantastic production. 50% used internally, 50% exported. Out of these 50%, only 5% are exported to the EU. 5% of the total production of palm oil in Indonesia is exported to the EU. Out of these 5%, 3 to 4% are through big plantations that have been certified some time ago. Who are the big importers of palm oil in the EU? Unilever, Ferrero Rocher, they have been certified for years and they are providing very good money. So we are talking about 1 to 2% of the production of palm oil in Indonesia affected by the EUDR. Look at the big pictures of the trade flows.
To understand why Donald Trump's tariff policy is insane, consider this. He says that the rest of the world has been ripping the U.S. off. The U.S. is the great victim here. We're going to be liberated. Go anywhere else in the rest of the world, they'll tell you the U.S. has done better than any country in the world in the last 30 or 40 years. U.S. technology companies dominate the world. U.S. banks dominate the world. We sell trillions of dollars of services to the rest of the world. And Trump thinks we're somehow the suckers in this system, and so he's going to burn the house down. It's just stupid. It's also mean. Because what is going to happen is these tariffs, which are taxes, the largest tax increase in 60 years in America, they hurt the poor, the lower middle class the most, because all sales taxes hurt the poor. It's also hurting the poorest countries in the world the most, because they're the ones desperate to get out of poverty, and they can't now export anything to the U.S. Madagascar can't export its vanilla to climb out of poverty. Stupid and mean. That defines Trump's tariff policies.
Jameson Greer was on television this morning, and I spoke to him, and he confirmed that more than 15 offers are already on the table, which is remarkable in just a mere matter of days. And as I said earlier, we've heard from more than 75 countries around the world. This is a team effort. The president has a team of great, brilliant advisors who have been with him every step of the way, and all of them will be divvying up the workload. And I just want to give the president and his trade team credit for taking this on. This is a massive undertaking. There's no doubt about it. We take it very seriously. The president is determined to renegotiate global trade on behalf of American workers. And again, you've seen people on both sides of the aisles calling for this for years, but I think no other president lacked the courage or maybe the work ethic or the stamina to take on such a task. And I know there were some questions about the president's delayed departure earlier to Walter Reed.